Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things. It's your old file Sick Part 2 here with my good friends Steve Axie and a Ghoul for Fun. There. I did
Fucking finally, dude.
Fucking happy, Steve. I'm not your fucking whore, Steve. Not your dancing monkey,
This was
Steve.
your one job. You had one job, and you forgot it until everything except the last episode.
Well, no, this is the second to last episode. It's fine. Anyway, yes, we're here to wrap up our regular episodes of Ghouly Gentlemen for the month of October by reviewing The Wolfman, the original 1941. I couldn't remember the year last time. The 1941 The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney. He's only credited as Lon Chaney, but it's Lon Chaney Jr., right?
Yeah, it is Lon Chaney Jr.
Okay, yeah. So starring Lon Chaney, part of the iconic Universal Monster films, the very first cinematic universe. Marvel, take fucking notes. Not really. And it's an interesting one because, Steve, you pointed out that this is like the one that's not really based on anything except just the general idea of a werewolf. It's not like adapting a book or a stage play or anything else. It is purely just film. And personally, I've always really liked werewolves. Werewolves have always been my favorite of like that universal monster kind of umbrella of vampires, zombies, Frankensteins, werewolves, yada yada. So it was quite an interesting one to watch and go back to. I think I remember watching this when I was a kid, on Turner Classic Movies with my dad in the lead up to Halloween, and it's just one of those things that kind of sticks with me. I was surprised by how much I remembered because I've not revisited this in a very long time. So I was surprised to see how much stuck with me. But I will say that this movie, it's maybe a little disappointing that this is the only one that is like wholly original to film, because they certainly copy over some less than desirable traits. Let's just go with that and continue on. But in general, what did you guys think of The Wolfman?
Alfie, what you got?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was. Obviously, with movies of this time, you kind of have to look at it for the time and look at its own merits in terms of where it stands as a piece of history, and not try and judge it by modern conventions like pacing and stuff. You got me on its own terms. So, just with all of that in mind, that still, I think, shows a level of quality and level of craft where I think all the performances in this were really good. I was really, especially by Chaney, I think he was really charismatic and captivating. I can see why he became such a big star on the back of just how charming he is, especially in these early parts of it. And then we don't get to fully dive into like much like hard-hitting moral dilemma, but for the time period, it's all of that kind of pushed together as this this big performance of just like you're losing your mind and we're not sure where it's going to go. And I think he did that really well. I think he sold that in a lot of humorous ways sometimes. That the way they're delivered, I kind of think some of it is intentionally meant to be like a little bit of like a guy with how some of the line delivery is meant to be delivered, with like some of the concept. But most of it feels genuinely sad and very tragic. And I think his relationship with the girl that he's trying to woo throughout the whole thing, I think that does a good job of feeling genuinely like there was a loss there, and there's not a lot of time spent there. I was surprised at how short this was, given like the pacing of it. It actually felt like it breezed by pretty quick. So I don't have much negative things to say about it. I think as we get into it, we'll maybe rip it apart a little bit by bit and go into more of the nitty gritty. But overall, I enjoyed it. I'm not the hugest fan of this era of horror. I think Frankenstein is probably still the one I like the most, just because I like a lot of the shots and imagery in that one. I like this more than Dracula, though, because Lugosi Dracula's kind of ass. But this one, I think, actually, I had a good time with this, would be my summary.
I'm always so amazed at the fact that, like, of all the Universal Monster movies, Bela Lugosi manages to be somebody in all of them. Because he's in Frankenstein... Or no, not Lugosi. What's his name that plays Frankenstein and the Mummy? Karloff. Karloff manages to be in so many of these. And then Lugosi's in Dracula and also in the Wolfman as the wolf... Romani. So I think that was probably the part of this that aged the poorest, is just, oh, the gypsies. Like, oh, that's... okay, here it goes. Oh yeah, you're gonna just sit there and celebrate and dance because he's dead? It is our culture. I mean, I think it's a little more complicated than that. Okay, yep, alright, yep. Ah, that old gypsy curse. Ah, the gypsyologicalness. I killed that gypsy. Man, they're just really throwing it all out there. I remember when I was in like fucking middle school and I found out that that was a slur for the first time, and I was like, oh. Movies like this do not help that. I thought that was just what you called those people.
Those people.
Yeah. What?
I like this movie a lot. It's not my favorite of this era, but it's probably number 2 or number 3. It's hard to because it's either The Invisible Man or Bride of Frankenstein that I like the most. But this is right behind both of those. I really, really like this one. It's simple, but I think it does a lot of things that are really interesting in its simplicity, and I think there's a lot of like cool parallels and ideas and stuff at work here that I feel like just kind of didn't exist in this era of Universal monster movies. I think with being based on books for a majority of them, a lot of that just kind of has a natural tendency to seep in. Like, you're going to adapt Mary Shelley, then you're going to say lines from Mary Shelley that are profound or deep or interesting, and that just kind of naturally rolls over. But this is the one where they really had to like work on adapting a genre of literature to film and trying to make it cinematic. And I think on that level of what does a piece of 19th century Gothic art look like if it was a movie, and reverse engineer that formula, I think they do like a really admirable job of it. It's cutesy. It's certainly like, it's not the most sophisticated thing in the world, but it's interesting, and for that perspective, I love that the movie opens with that really strong parallel of Lon Chaney Jr. shows back up to meet his estranged dad after his brother, one of his father's sons has already died, and the last thing in the movie is the dad kills his other son, and there's a nice sort of cyclical tragedy to that whole thing. The movie is not super in depth about it, but I do think it's smart about the idea of trying to pair mysticism against science, and kind of circling back around to a point where a lot of the characters' dialogue sort of lends itself to the idea that like science and mysticism might be different things, but the way people talk about science, it sure does sound like a religion in its own right. And for the time, I thought that was very astute and really interesting. The makeup looks really good still. It's paced very well. And it is like ultimately a tragedy. It's allowed to be a tragedy in a way where I think a lot of monster movies kind of cop out at the end. So I like this one a lot.
That is very true.
I
It does have just a bummer ending,
well,
doesn't it?
at the end of the movie, I remember I didn't remember how far into the movie I was, but we were getting close to the end. So like I paused for a minute and I made myself a sandwich so I could like sit down and watch the finale and eat my sandwich. And then like 3 minutes go by and the movie's fucking over, and there's no epilogue, there's no resolution, there's no sort of like reconciliation. It's just, oh yeah, you killed your son. He was a werewolf. The end. It's
Right?
kind of depressing. And I kind of like that. So I like this movie a lot.
No, I mean I agree. It kind of sucks how many movies really do cop out to try to give it just like a happy ending or whatever. And I do appreciate that this one kind of just doubles down on it. It's really funny that this movie, in order to make their cinematic universe, they have to keep bringing the Wolfman back to life. Because I think he dies at the end of it's Wolfman versus Frankenstein. I think he dies at the end of that, and then they gotta bring him back for Abbott and Costello, as well.
Yeah.
So it's quite amusing.
Dracula, you can sort of like understand why he keeps coming back. He's a vampire or whatever, but like they just keep building bullshit werewolf lore as these movies go on, and it's kind of great.
Well, that's the thing I like about it is it's just so like kind of slapped together and a little bit hokey, but that kind of works for it because it makes you kind of feel where you're at with the no, this can't be real. Like, what are the rules here? And you don't really know. They tell you some stuff, but it's also like chalked up to superstition and it's looked down upon so heavily that you are kind of alienated and you're not 100% sure of everything, which is kind of cool. I'll push back a little bit with you, Steve, on the makeup. I think a lot of the stuff they do with like the arms and legs makeup looks fine. I don't think I've ever liked the way they do the werewolf face in this.
I was interested when you mentioned things about this not aging well, and we talked about the Romani thing. Do you feel like, because I've had this conversation with other people, that at the end of the day, the Wolfman makeup looks just a little bit too much like blackface?
That didn't occur to me. Wolves have a snout. And so anytime I see a werewolf where they don't do the snout and they just like keep a flat actor's face, I don't like it. Funny enough, that's a little bit of what's going on in like the 2010 Wolfman. That was not really a remake of this, but more like a tribute to this. Other werewolf things do it, and it's weird because I also don't like when you go just the full other direction and the person just turns into a literal wolf. Not like a hybrid at all. It's just a dog running around kind of thing. I hate that shit. Fucking Netflix original series Hemlock Grove has what is undeniably one of the best werewolf transformations I've ever seen on film, and it's so fucking sick because you literally see like the skin stretch and like rip off and everything, but then it is undercut by just utter disappointment as it's just a wolf standing there at the end of it all. It just fucking really like wind completely out of your sails. Kind of thing, and I always get disappointed by that, but I get disappointed by this like aesthetic, I guess, of werewolf too. And I don't necessarily hold it wholly against this movie. This is the first time they're trying to do something kind of this this far-fetched with prosthetics, I would think. Because, like, what else would go this hard with prosthetics this early?
I think there's actually quite a few examples that I was going to bring up that I kind of disagree with that, because I think the makeup effects at this time are actually sometimes better than, like, a lot of modern ones. I think you look at the the Boris Karloff Frankenstein makeup. And I think
Mhm.
it absolutely fucking dunks on this. Like, it's not obviously the hair implants and stuff, but just from a prosthetic work in terms of morphing someone's
Mhm.
face, it does a really, really good job. And most importantly, it looks good on camera and how it's shot, so you don't notice the seams that you would if we looked at that makeup today in like broad daylight and stuff. But it still looks pretty good if you see like restorations and stuff in museums and places. So that's one of them. The Phantom of the Opera that came out around this time, a little earlier, also I
Yeah,
think has
about
better.
1931, I think.
Yeah, has much better makeup prosthetics than this. So I think they just kind of, I think Universal was kind of pumping these out at this point. So I just think they tried very hard on the makeup effects for this one, in comparison, because they
See,
absolutely could have done better.
yeah, I guess that's not really the point I was driving at. Because I do agree that the other Universal movies look a lot better. When I said the prosthetics of the time just weren't up to the challenge, I was talking specifically about like
Doing this now.
merging someone into something completely
Uh-huh.
inhuman. Like Frankenstein looks monstrous, but he looks like a corpse, right? And very big corpse, but a corpse. The Phantom of the Opera is just like scar tissue. The Mummy is basically age makeup. The step of prosthetics to like lend animalistic features to a human face and an actor be able to actually walk around and perform through it. I'm trying to think of stuff that was up to that tier. And I mean, in all fairness, we still don't do it well all the time today. So I'm just sitting there trying to think because you'd have like Island of Dr. Moreau around this time. You'd have Wizard of Oz a short time later, where you'd get like the witches and the flying monkeys and stuff. Um, so it's not that kind of caliber wouldn't exist or wouldn't be around yet, but this might just be a stepping stone to some of that.
I will say too, one thing I don't love about the Wolfman transformation is we've seen things historically where we're able to use cuts and dissolves and stuff in a way that's discreet and create a transition without looking like they're just a dissolve. And I really don't like the transformation sequence in this, where it just dissolves from like hairy leg, slightly hairier leg, full blown hairy legs.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, especially in the other movies, they are a little bit more sophisticated about that. And I think editing wise, they just kind of got lazy. Either they got lazy or they weren't sure how to make the hairs pop out more. But I mean, I've seen other movies from this time where I think transformations on screen were possible. And a lot of the time, it just had to do with building props and stuff. Like, it didn't even have to do with applying makeup. Like, you could see a lot of effort being put into things like even like Nosferatu, to try and give you the full effect of someone becoming a vampire, but you didn't really have that here, and I think that does hurt a little bit. Now, to be fair, the Wolfman's not in this movie very much either, uh, which is another thing
Mm-hmm.
I actually really like about it, where the confrontation and the transformation that Lon Chaney goes through to become the Wolfman is all basically at the very end of the movie. And I really like how for the first like 50 minutes to 60 minutes or so, you kind of have no reason to believe him. He could just literally be psychotic of some level. And it does kind of have that sort of early Hitchcock style thriller vibe of like how much of this is he telling the truth? How much of this does he actually remember? Because you go into this movie expecting him to be the Wolfman because you know that. But if you just watched this movie in 1941, you would have no reason to believe that that's what was actually happening. And the movie actually does a really good job of making that transformation kind of a reveal. I thought that was actually really cool.
See, I don't know. I'm always like torn on that because the thing it reminds me of is like the movie Chucky.
Child's
Not Chucky,
Play.
Child's Play. Yeah, because like the whole movie, you've got everyone. Is his name Danny? You've got everyone treating Danny. I'm gonna go with
I don't
Danny.
actually remember. Yeah.
As if he's Yeah, as if he's crazy, as if he's like a child murderer. And then, like, it's the reveal to everyone else, or specifically to the mother, that it's actually been the doll. But that's all undercut for us as the audience when in the first, like, 15 minutes of the movie we see the doll fucking, like, the guy put his spirit into the doll and the doll move around and the doll do all this shit. So it's like, it undercuts the drama of what's happening to Danny or Charlie or whatever the fuck his name is. So it undercuts it. That's how I kind of felt with this. Is you're right, I do have the context of I know he's gonna be, but we kind of see him changing. We don't see the Wolfman do a lot, but we see him changing on screen into the Wolfman at different points before he does stuff. So it's like we know it. It's not a mystery. It's not like vague anymore. We just know that he is. And personally, I'm never super big fan of just wait, don't show your monster thing. I find that to get like kind of exhausting more often than not. But I don't think that means do a plot where it's a stronger plot if you don't show your monster, but also show your monster.
I guess. I mean, I see what you're saying for sure, and I have that problem with a lot of other monster movies. Something Joss Whedon talked about back when he was directing the first Avengers movies, that the problem with writing the Hulk is that you as the character and you as the audience have two opposing goals, which is the audience wants to see the Hulk, the character never wants to become the Hulk, and trying to like square those opposing incentives is really hard to do. But I'll push back in this context a little bit, because I think part of what makes this work as something more than just a monster movie, where I feel like it does kind of have its own ideas and where it is kind of pulling from Gothic literature without directly sourcing a specific book, is when it talks about faith versus science. And again, it's not super sophisticated in that way, but I think there is something here to like the fact that his dad's a scientist and an astronomer, and that he, every time something Wolfman related comes up, there needs to be some sort of like physical evidence to explain it, and there kind of never is. And like the fact that he doesn't have an injury on his chest from being attacked by a wolf is the big thing early on. And I like that the movie is kind of pushing the characters to be like, just take him on faith here that something weird is going on, and maybe you can kind of reconcile this gap and figure out how to solve it together. But no one's sort of willing to make that step, because everyone is so empiricist about everything to the point where it becomes its own sort of level of blind faith. And that's kind of the deeper tragedy at the end of it, where like if his dad just didn't try and rationalize what was going on and just trust his son for a minute, maybe they could have talked this out somehow, maybe they could have contained it, but at the end he just ends up killing him over it. And I think that's kind of, I think that's a little bit more interesting, and I think that's good. I do agree that like they definitely tip their hand a little bit too much, but they are interestingly restrictive of how much Wolfman stuff we see, so that even you as the audience do kind of have a level of second guessing yourself. Especially like in 1940, right? You see Bela Lugosi show up in a movie and he just gets fucking murdered off screen 2 minutes in. There's probably a part of you that thought like, oh no, he'll come back somehow, right? He's got to, and then he never does.
It's funny to think about the 2010 remake, quote unquote remake in spirit, in which Anthony Hopkins is also a Wolfman, and it's like he's playing the same father figure character and everything, or literal father character. It's really amusing. Yeah, it's not as good as it could have been. You watch the fucking trailer and it's so good, and it's clearly they used every good thing for the trailer.
Well, they also cut a lot of the stuff from the trailers in the final cut, so like it's an even shorter, less coherent movie, and the trailers are actually better.
Yeah. You know what fucking sent me talking about like this movie is just a thing of its time, and just the fact that like people aged so much faster in the past because everyone like fucking Shane smoked cigarettes daily. Lon Chaney Jr. looks so much older than the actor playing his father, and yet is not. It fucking threw me for such a goddamn loop. That he is not the same. That he is not actually younger, because it felt like just such a fucking classic Hollywood movie kind of thing to do, of just, oh, we'll cast two actors like the same age, or maybe one's a little bit younger to play the father. No, the actor is like at least 15 years older than Lon Chaney Jr., but it doesn't look it, and also Lon Chaney Jr. is so much fucking taller than that guy. Clearly their mother was just a giant.
That's something as well that like it took me a while to even grasp that was like his dad. I was like, they must be talking about someone else. Like he's got like his friend or maybe a sibling like this, because he doesn't even interact. Yeah, because he doesn't even talk to him like a. He's probably my favorite character in the whole thing. Because I really like the father character. I think he has the best line. He has the best lines. All of his, he has something to the effect. Oh yeah, the fucking you policemen are in such a hurry, as if the dead don't have eternity. Like shit like that is so fucking cool. Like I want that guy to play Sherlock Holmes. That he's fucking sick. But like that. I was very strange getting used to that. I completely agree, and like the idea that he's not just playing a child. I'm trying a young man who's like way older looking than he kind of looks like.
It just reminds me of when we talked about It's a Wonderful Life, and what's his fucking name?
Jimmy
Steve,
Stewart?
the main actor. Yeah, Jimmy Stewart's playing a fucking teenager, and
They don't even try to make him look younger. I love that. I love that so much.
I'll give you the moon. I'll give you the moon. Fucking like 40-year-old man sitting there talking to this girl. Oh, I can't wait to go off to college.
There is something about like old school slang that I feel like, regardless of how you look, just seems to age you immediately. Like there's that one movie where Zac Efron changes places, or like his dad is like 40 years old and turns into young Zac Efron and like goes to school, but he's dressed like an old man. And there's just something about listening to Zac Efron say like 1960s and 70s slang that instantly makes him look really old.
There's like studies about this where it's like, yes, people actually did age faster, and a lot of it had to do with smoking. Than they are now, but more so it's an effect of like dress and language and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but man, some of these guys and women too, just you look back and it's like, that dude's 30? Holy shit.
What's her name? The one person in the movie I don't have that effect quite with is the woman who plays Gwen. I feel like she's kind of perfectly cast in this, and I think she does a really good job for like the little material she's given. I mean, you've got like the old school movie, like kind of weird stalker meet cutes. Like he was just looking at her window and is talking about her earrings. Like, this isn't fucking creepy, and then she just like rolls along with it. But you know, whatever. It's the 1940s. I guess that's just how.
I'll pick you up at 8. I'll pick you up at 8. No. No. Comes down at 8. Okay. You're incorrigible.
Yeah, that's a little bit rough. But I will say, I think her and Lon Chaney have a lot of really good chemistry. And whereas the dad feels like the actor's not quite old enough to kind of match the energy the character's supposed to have, I think those two do kind of hit it off very naturally with each other. And while they don't have like the most time in the world to deal and flesh out with that romance, I do think there is like a strong sense of tragedy at the end when he tries to choke her out and then his dad has to kill him. And then the moment a little bit before that where the Romani woman is like giving her out and saying like, look, I know you're going to the Wolfman, just follow me instead, and she doesn't do it. I do like her quite a bit, and I like her role in this. It is not the most, it's not the most fleshed out, well-written role, but I do think the actress makes up for that.
Yeah, she does fine. Again, it's just the like of the time thing. That fucking meme of like me when I follow my grandfather's dating advice. It's It's like, oh no, do the half moon earrings, the dangle down. How do you know
It's
about
so
those? Oh, well,
creepy.
I'm psychic, you see. Oh, get the fuck out of here. I have a boyfriend. I am engaged, motherfucker. Oh, but wouldn't you rather come out with me? See you at 8. Pick you up at 8. Oh, fuck.
I just can't believe like
Very
any
uncomfortable.
point in history where people are like, yeah, that's just flirting. Like, what do you mean?
Honestly, though, I actually think you'd be surprised at, especially like in a lot of communities and stuff like that. Like, if a gal is like with the guy, especially of this era, right, where they're normally just together as like they met in school or they met something. Sometimes a guy that just can beat the other guy up, turning up and say, "You got a boyfriend? Yeah? Can he fight? No? Oh well, you're my girlfriend now, I guess." That actually is surprisingly effective. To like, I actually did. It's obviously for the time period and stuff like that. It wouldn't fly today, but I completely bought that as like, you see a guy when he turns up, he is kind of a little bit of a bitch in comparison in terms of... So, like, I could totally buy that, like, he's just persistent enough and he's charming enough in how he goes about it. Like, yeah, this is fucking toxic, but I could believe she's into it.
There's also like at least on a generous reading, right? This idea that like he represents the outside world, that she's lived in the same town, she has a store that's owned by her father. There's very limited experience or exposure outside of this world for her. I mean, like, she literally works in an antique store and is selling old things, and then here comes this guy who's been away for a really long time. No one really knows who he is. He's strange, he's exotic in a certain kind of way, and that's kind of attractive in its own right.
I mean, maybe. I think you might be justifying too much for what is just poorly written. Like, not even poorly written, just male gaze
Sure.
written
Yeah. And I mean that I
dynamics.
mean that's where the whole criticism started here is like I think that like the relationship is not particularly well developed, but I could see where they were going with it on a certain level.
I mean, I think that's just what you're seeing is like pretty typical, again, male gaze written romance. You know, it's a very male focused fantasy of you just see a cute girl accidentally, maybe it's a little creepy. Well, you just be charming and you just come up and talk to her and be like direct and just don't take no for an answer, and then she'll just fall all over you. Um, it's I mean, there's probably women that works on. That's fine. No, not here to shame anyone. It is just like really amusing to see how like blatant it was that we ultimately we still do shit like that in movies. We're
Yeah.
just a little bit more clever about it now. This is just before they needed to be clever. And I just find it's just hella funny to watch. I don't think that there's anything outside of it. It's just apparently it worked for her. He just found the right sequence of phrases to say to get in those pants, and that's whatever. It's just really really funny. That's something I want. Steve, you watch all the fucking like greatest 100 films, blah blah blah. What is not today, not tonight. Take some time to think about it. But I want you to find me the most like kind of reaction pickup scene. That's what I need in my life. I want the most like, oh, this is terrible.
So, have you ever seen Bringing Up Baby?
No.
Okay, so Bringing Up Baby is this old rom-com, and it stars Cary Grant and
When you say old, okay.
this old rom-com starring Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. It's from around this same period, actually. It's from like the late 1930s, and essentially Cary Grant plays a paleontologist, and he's working at a museum, and like he's building skeletons of dinosaurs and shit like that. And then this fucking woman shows up named that's Katharine Hepburn. and she's got a pet baby leopard, hence baby in the movie, and she is just a fucking human tornado and just an absolute disaster, and will like not leave this guy alone, and like gets him thrown in jail, gets him almost mauled out by a lion, gets him like almost shot at a couple of times, and she refuses to go away. And at the end, after the whole ordeal's been settled and he gets the money he needs for his museum or whatever, she shows up and she wrecks his life's work by completely demolishing a skeleton he's been working on. And then at the end, he's just like, yeah, I guess I'm just stuck with you now. There's nothing outside of this. I'm just eternally trapped by Katharine Hepburn. And it's kind of fucked up, but it's really funny.
Okay. Alright, that's pretty good. It's pretty good. Haley loves, no, it's Audrey Hepburn, not Katharine Hepburn, so never mind. Got myself
Close
confused
enough.
there.
Close enough.
Forgive you.
Same last name. Alright, back to the Wolfman. What else haven't we talked about with this fucking movie?
I guess the thing that I
Was there any...
go ahead.
Go ahead.
The thing that I wanted to kind of get out, this is, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I just want to say, because I think I saw somewhere, and I haven't got a source for this, so I could be completely wrong. If I am, like, correct me. But just how this film plays out, and a lot of like the things that we're talking about with how the makeup seemed rushed, and like the transition for the werewolf transformation seemed rushed as well. I really do think I would like this movie more if we never saw the werewolf, or it was all just in his head. I think there's a lot more interesting things to explore with that when it does just turn into the werewolf, there isn't enough of a payoff there for me, like emotionally or character-wise, that aside from just like the ending being tragic, that, oh, this guy we liked is fucking dead and stuff, like you feel something like that, but the actual execution of that just makes me feel kind of like, oh, all right, this is just kind of going into hokier territory now. And again, it's still charming, it's still fun, but I do think with the setup of all of this, I wonder if they had maybe... Because the thing I saw is that was the original intention in the original idea for the script, but then because of the Universal boon and stuff like that, something more subversive like that just wasn't going to fly. They were going to, you have to show us a werewolf, you have to do the werewolf. So... And obviously, they made the right call because it made a lot more money and they made a lot more movies after with the fucking werewolf. So, but I think I would have liked to see the version of this movie that was more of just the idea of the werewolf corrupting someone and him committing these murders, or maybe he doesn't even commit, just something a little bit more vague, especially with how moody a lot of the atmosphere is this, with the fog and the forests and the old houses and stuff.
Just those shots of them walking around in the fog.
Yeah, and like the score sounding exactly like Danny Elfman's Batman music doesn't have like how good like it gives the mood. Like it sounds like the Batman march. So when you're watching it and it kicks in, it's just, I don't know. I feel like I would have been more of a like I had a good time with this, but I feel like when I was invested in it was when I was like, well, I know they show the Wolfman because I know what he looks like, but I was kind of more interested in when they kept telling like, dude, there's no fucking wolf, and like we never saw it on screen. And I don't know. I think I would have liked that more as a film, to be honest.
I could definitely see where you're coming from on that. I think it is plotted that way, and they just, for the budget and marketing reasons, they do show you, and because it's like that universal banner, it's able to get away with it. Because it's just so... It is iconic. I mean, again, part of my complaint for why I don't like the flat-faced look of this is it's so iconic, it's become the default for how a Wolfman should look. A lot of the time, we've slowly drifted toward more prominent with like the snout instead, but not as much as I'd want. So it is interesting how iconic that became. The question I was going to ask before Alfie started talking about that, though, is my thing with watching the Universal Monster movies, and I kind of tried to test this theory out the other night when we were watching this. is I don't think any of them are actually scary. Uh, Maybe at the time they were, but like even to a modern standard with someone that hasn't seen a lot of horror movies, I don't think these movies are scary. So what I tried to do was get Leah to just sit there and watch The Wolfman with me, and we made it through the opening credits, and like there's the beginning scenes with him and talking to his dad and stuff, and that's when she got bored and walked away. But I was really curious to see if like we'd get to a point where she felt like scared or anything. But then just watching it on my own with Haley, nah. Just I know my kid, and I just know that she wouldn't have actually been scared by any of the stuff that happens in this movie. And it's just, I don't know, it's really fascinating to me that these are like iconic horror movies, and I don't think they have a single scene in them that can scare a modern audience, even someone that hasn't watched like hard R horror movies.
I think.
Steve, you've got more substance to say.
I think part of it is just the way these movies are designed. And even if you go back and read the source material, a lot of this stuff is based on. The monster part of it is never really like the point of it. And so I almost feel like it's worth splitting off from horror movie versus a monster movie. I think those, especially when we're talking about the Universal stuff, feel like valuable distinctions, because modern horror movies, a lot of them don't even really have monsters anymore, right? Like the horror is the metaphor of the trauma, or the horror is the metaphor of the situation, or whatever. But back then, when we're talking about like old school monster movies, I think the appeal of the monster movie was very similar to the appeal of like a summer blockbuster in the 70s or a superhero movie today, where you're kind of watching it for the visual spectacle, not because it's scary. And I mean, this is part of the big success with Lugosi's Dracula. As much as it's not a particularly great, coherent movie, a lot of the style and the visuals and the theatrics, a lot of the stuff that's pulled right from the stage play that made it into the movie enraptures a lot of audiences. No one was afraid of Bela Lugosi's Dracula. Everyone thought he was cool and sexy, and that was kind of the point. And I think The Wolfman straddles an interesting line between the two, where it's definitely not a scary movie. It's not really much of a thriller, but it is a mystery. And it's one of those things that's trying to capture a more standard 1930s mystery plot, where the twist is the monster just is in it. Like we joke about like how movies are better if at the end the predator shows up, and that's kind of what this is, where at the end of the day it's a movie.
The Wolfman versus the predator.
Yeah. Like at the end of the day, it's a movie about a father and a son who aren't able to reconcile, to the point where the father kills him. It's playing on a lot of like really old symbolic archetypes and stuff. It's about faith and mysticism. But then a universal monster shows up at the end, and it's the Wolfman. And that aspect of it has a lot of like potent symbolic power. Like people have written about like what specifically is the movie saying with the Wolfman and the growing the hair and the sexuality and stuff, that I think is all worthwhile and interesting. But I don't think this is the kind of movie, and I don't think any of the Universal monster movies are the kinds of movies that are going after scares. I think they're really just kind of going for pushing the theatrical side of it. As much shit as Steven Spielberg had to pull to create Jaws as a shark is the kind of shit they had to pull to create Frankenstein and Dracula and the Wolfman and all that stuff. And so I don't really view them as horror movies necessarily, but I'm also of the opinion that I don't think horror movies have to be scary in the moment. I think they just have to be intellectually terrifying.
Alpha, you
Yeah, my thing
is
is I feel like the worst person in the world to comment on any of that, because I'm still fucking notorious, I guess, for being unable to be scared by any horror movie. So like, I feel it's just unfair. When I go back to like anything with this, it's like I'm not even looking at them as horror movies, to be honest. I'm just looking at them as like mood pieces, or just movies that have slightly more fog in them, you know. Like I just can't. It's nothing it could ever do would ever give me a scare, because I'm just broken like that, I guess. But like, I just can't objectively look at it that way. So it's just a movie to me. I didn't even look at it in terms of a horror movie, to be quite honest.
It's interesting. I didn't know that you had like horror blindness, I
Erin will
guess.
literally never stop. Like she's like every time we watch a horror movie, she's like, "You're broken. There's something wrong with you. You're like impossible to like scan." I was like, "I don't know. It just I just stare blankly at the screen, I guess."
See, I used to have a bit of that, and then like in 2014, 2015, it like all came back, like a lifetime's worth of it came
Oh
up at
damn.
once, and like I was like legit getting like fucking nightmares and everything off of movies that I liked, but just suddenly had a much more profound effect on me. It was one Halloween, and Haley's like, "You want to watch this movie 1408?" And I'm like, "I don't know. If I think I'm gonna have nightmares if I fucking watch that movie." She's like, "Really?" I'm like, yeah. It's fucking, it just all came out at once. So it's kind of funny because I used to have that quite a bit. Like as a teenager, I could watch fucking the most gory, horrific thing, but then certain movies just started sticking with me. I grew my empathy genes a little bit more, I guess, and I was able to put myself more in the situation. Babadook really fucked with me the
That's
first time I
such a
watched that
fucked
movie.
up movie, man. That's a hard watch
Oh my
sometimes.
god.
Like the scene
Yeah.
that every time I watch the Babadook, the scene that like really like kind of like pulls at my heart and makes me sick to my stomach is the mom being sick in the bed and the kid coming in because he has to take his medicine, but he's not supposed to eat it without having food first, and she just shoos him away and then yells at him, and it's just legitimately kind of terrifying because you empathize with that kid so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that movie. Sometimes I don't know. It's weird because like my friend Andrew, growing up, he was always really like easily scared. My favorite Andrew story to demonstrate this is he lived next door to me, not across the street, not down the block. Our yards touched. um, and there was like not even like backyard touch, side by side. There was a street light. You could walk from my front door to his front door and be perfect view of the street light and not even have to touch pavement, right? One night he and I are at my house and we watched Cujo, Stephen King's Cujo, the movie about the dog. And we get to the end of that, he's like, "Ian, you gotta walk me home." I'm just like, really? He's like, yeah, you gotta do it. I cannot go outside on my own right now. If a dog barks, I'm going to pee my pants. Like, jeez, okay. And he needed to like take a hammer across the yard just in case a dog showed up. And I still laugh at it because it's just so ridiculous today. But like, he was always really easily touched. I know Haley had like the classic Jaws experience where the first time she watched Jaws, she didn't want to get in water for the rest of the summer, which was funny for her because her parents have a little pond out back that they go swimming in. She didn't want to do that. She didn't want to take showers or baths because she watched Jaws. And so it's interesting how that stuff sticks with people. I imagine at the time that the Universal monster movies were coming out, just because of how new film still was, relatively speaking, that there were people who were legitimately like terrified of what they were seeing. But I don't know how much that was the rule. It's just interesting to me to watch these and like. I guess I've never thought about the idea that they're not really supposed to be scary, because I'd always just assumed that's what they were going for. And it just hasn't aged.
You
But
go
I don't know,
back
maybe that's
and because I don't know why any other human being who isn't me would do this, but if you go back and pull reviews from the 1930s of when these movies came out, all of the positive reviews of something like Dracula talk about how it's a really great mystery movie and how it's got a lot of atmosphere and how it's got a lot of good plotting and stuff. and all the negative reviews say this movie's not scary at all. So like this is something that I feel like there was a tension from the very beginning. And I think the proponents of the Universal Monster movies, the people who really liked all of these movies, didn't view them as horror movies, which is why they liked them so much.
Maybe. I don't know. I've never... me get context on something before I review it? Get out of here with that bullshit. I don't know. It's always something that I've kind of found fascinating about these. Because, like, my mom hates fucking horror. She cannot do it. She doesn't like anything. She doesn't even like spooky, right? Like, there's that, like, the spooky but not scary kind of thing. She doesn't even like that. So she just never wants to touch anything. And she won't even watch one of these because she thinks it's too scary. And I'm like, okay.
I'm gonna attack Alfie here, but I feel like
beat him up, kick his ass, Steve.
To me, one of the great joys of watching movies is being so sucked into the emotions that regardless of how much you know or don't know, you still kind of find yourself rooting for the opposite. Like when you were watching a tragedy and you get to the moment where the bad thing happens, and instinctively, even though you know you've seen this movie before, you feel yourself hoping for something else to happen. And to me, one of the greatest joys of watching a horror movie is like whether it's good or bad or mediocre or whatever, is like surrendering to the premise enough and letting yourself feel really afraid, knowing that there's really nothing scary happening. Like shitty ass horror movies from like just this year, like The Nun 2 and the Boogeyman and Insidious the Red Door. None of these are good movies. None of these are movies that are going to give me nightmares. But when I'm in the theater and I'm watching it in front of me, I am in it. I am scared. I am closing my eyes because I don't want to see the scary thing happen. And that's just so much fun to me. When I feel like a movie is going to make me break out in a cold sweat, even if it doesn't earn it, I just think that's fun. And I don't understand how another human being cannot feel like that's just so much fun, to just want to be scared.
Man, it's not a lack of one. It just doesn't happen. You know, like I wish I could
different.
I truly, it's like I'm fucking a crazy person, right? I feel like the fucking Andrew Garfield meme, but he's like, I'm not the fucking werewolf. Like, I swear to God, man, if I could just, because I was scared as a kid, right? I could do it, and then around like 10 or something, I guess I just got sad, and then I never got it back, or whatever the fuck. But like, I want to invest in it with these things. I want to feel it, and I love seeing people's reactions to it. I love watching horror movies with other people, but it just doesn't happen. I wish it's annoying.
I think it's the Britishness. No, it's just being British.
You know, you're
it's
already
that stiff upper lip thing.
You're already the scariest thing on the planet, which is a right British dude. You know,
it's true. It is true. No. I guess that one alpha predator cannot fear unless a being,
right? How much can Michael Myers say he has murdered relative to the British Empire? You know,
I guess that's it, man. I guess that's
it. It's funny because it reminds me of I think it was David Blaine discussing magic, and like I was like, yeah, I've done a couple shows or done my like videos, my street magic in the UK. And it goes all right, but it's nothing compared to going to America, and you'll be on the streets because Americans just have no fear about being so animated. And like it was great because when I was watching him talk about this, they showed clips from his like street magic specials, right, where he did they show the same trick that he's doing for a group of Americans, a group of Brits, and the group of Americans, it's like 5 black dudes, and he does the trick, and they all like jump around, like holy shit, like looks exactly like that one gif, right? And then he does the trick for some like fucking white British people, and they're like, "Oh, how'd you do that?" It's just the most like subdued, huh? That's weird kind of reaction. And even then, he's like, that was probably the best reaction I got in the UK. And it's so fucking true, because I remember watching Death by Magic, which is a series on Netflix, and it's got the best presentation I've ever seen for the buried alive trick, where it's like, he's in a glass coffin, glass all around, people are surrounding him, and they're throwing the dirt on top, and he's sitting there trying to get out the whole time, and it's nothing's happening. He's like wriggled out of the fucking handcuffs or whatever, and the dirt's coming in, and you see the coffin lid like bowing, and he's like banging on it. He's trying to get out. He goes, "Oh no, oh no!" And then like the dirt just fucking collapses, and it's just like one British lady goes, "Oh my!" And then like fucking from behind all of them, he just comes out of the dirt from a different spot, and they like softly clap. And I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" This is the best performance I've ever seen in my entire life. And these fucks are just, oh my. Fucking hate the British, man.
I
They're
hate
terrible.
the British too, man. I truly do. It feels like this is how the werewolf must feel. It's like you are cast with like instead of like a pentagram on their palm, I just see like a crumpet.
That's another thing I really liked about this movie that I thought was kind of interesting. Just from like a historical perspective of like you have a movie that's about science versus faith, but you also have like a very specific Christian faith on top of it. So like you can't just be a wolfman. Oh no, he has to be a satanic wolfman because he sees pentagrams. And the people who cursed him with this are the Romani because Bela Lugosi's the one who bites him. And I thought that kind of aspect of it was interesting because it's not helping the case for the movie not aging well, because you could certainly look at this stuff and feel like, wow, there was certainly like some kind of weird subconscious agenda going on here. But I do think it's still kind of interesting. I feel like as like a historical time capsule, could you imagine doing anything Wolfman related now where they just like fucking see pentagrams? That's such a weird thing to do, but it felt like it made perfect sense in the 1940s, I guess.
I mean, can we also just stop for a second when we're talking about the pentagrams to say, that's not a pentagram, that's a star. You need the lines.
Yeah, that too.
It's a lot less intimidating without the lines in it, you know? It's just like a little kid star. Yeah, that was amusing to me. I don't know. Weird fucking time with this.
Yeah, I still really like it. It's probably one I'll go back to more recently, just because I haven't seen this in a while. But I think on talking about it, I think I like it a lot more than I did even at the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. It's I don't think it's like perfect by any means, but I don't hate watching it. It just got some stuff that hasn't aged the best. Do we have anything else we want to talk about with this one before we wrap up for the night?
I'm good. I just think the star stuff again, I thought was funny as well. But like you, Steve, I think that is a fun wrinkle to it. And Cheney kind of looks a little bit like how Alex Ross draws Superman, which is interesting.
That's really fun.
There was a scene where he was in the car with his hat on, and I'm like, fucking Tom Hanks.
Yeah, there's some of that there too.
I like the scene where they're at church, and because he's got the guilt of having killed the guy, he can't bring himself to go in and sit down for the sermon. I like that quite a bit.
I don't know a ton about the history of Lon Chaney, but I do know that like Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff used to be rivals, especially after Bela Lugosi kind of got phased out of these movies. And I know that there was a lot of like animosity between the two, and like there would be like script changes and shooting changes based on their egos between Karloff and Lugosi. But Lon Chaney Jr. is in this mix too, and I don't know where he fits into this triangle, except for the fact that I am sure the second someone showed the Wolfman to Bela Lugosi at his house or something, and he realized that he just gets fucking murdered by Lon Chaney and that is never in the movie again, he must have been pissed.
He kind of seemed
What,
to
do you think
like
he was the
those
fucking
roles.
Not according to a lot of his biographers. Like a lot of people say that like he was very egomaniacal, this kind of stuff. He was not happy paying second fiddle to people like Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi or Lon Chaney. That he liked these roles because they kept him famous, but he also didn't like what he had to do in order to get cast in these movies. And as time went on, he was just getting paid less and less to be in them.
That makes sense from that perspective. I've just been looking at it. Seemed like his best performances, like in is it Son of Frankenstein, the third one that he's in, is like his best performance.
That's the one where he plays the monster, right?
No, I think he's like an Igor type in that. I'm not quite. It's hard to remember. It's been a long time, but like he's really, really captivating in that. And he seems to have like I think that's his last role as well before he passed.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. I feel like the movies that he probably likes the least are some of his best. Like I really like Black Cat. I think that's a really good classic horror movie that's really underrated. It's one of those things where I feel like oftentimes an artist is really their own worst judge of their works. Like I don't think what Bela Lugosi thought his best movie was is his best movie per se.
I mean, that's 100% true, because Alan Moore has talked shit about The Killing Joke, but it's the best thing he's ever done.
The only exception to that rule that I know, Hitchcock said that Shadow of a Doubt is his best movie, and I kind of agree with him. I think that movie fucking slaps, and no one talks about it.
Interesting. Alright, well, I think that'll do it for this episode. Let's go ahead and do ratings then. I'll give The Wolfman from 1941 3 creepy stalker pickup lines out of 5.
I'll give The Wolfman 4 out of 5 really lazy transformation sequences.
I'll give Wolfman 3 out of 5 killer performances from younger looking fathers.
Gotcha. Alright. Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I am Sick Part 2.
I got what you called me. I'm just gonna be a ghoul for fun.
That's exactly what I called you.
Yeah.
Was I Steve Axie? Was that it? All right.
Mm-hmm. And we are your ghouly gentlemen, and we will be dissected. Ha 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 ha!